Good morning, my YouTube viewers. It is Palestine here. It's a lovely hot morning in the UK. I think it's going to be 33 degrees and so Celsius. But since they don't normally have air conditioning in English homes, then it's going to be hot. I don't have a fan either. I had a fan a long time ago and it broke, and I never got another one because I was always thinking I was gonna meet my knight in shining armor and he was gonna take me away from all this, but of course that never happened, and so I'm still here. Basically, and I'm also dressed in nice summery clothes, wearing leggings and some sandals that I got at a charity shop, because this afternoon I'm going to go do some gardening for my friend because he needs help with his garden, and so I just said I will help him with his garden. So I'm wearing nice summery clothes. I'm going to take an old beat up white t-shirt with me and my fake Crocs with me, and when I get to his house I'm going to change into clothes that it doesn't matter if I get them dirty, because I don't have a lot of clothes that I can get dirty because I don't have a garden, so I can't work in the garden. And obviously you can look at me and tell I don't go out in the gym and work, and I don't do a lot of DIY, so I don't have a lot of clothes that I can get dirty in. But so I'm going to wear a pair of leggings and an old t-shirt that I've had like more than 35 years, and I'm going to do gardening in that t-shirt. But what I wanted to talk about, something's happened here. And I don't know what's happened. If you just hold on just a second. Just a second. I've turned on a lamp, even though you certainly don't need a lamp. But I've turned on a lamp so there's some light by my phone, because I'm recording this video on my phone. And a lot of people who have a lot more viewers than I do record their videos on their phone, such as Jody Wright, Too Cute for Cancer. She started recording her video on her phone as well. But just to get some light, I've had to turn the lamp on just to do that, so you can actually see a little bit of my face. But that's not why I made this video. This video is about human resources. Okay, so my first job in the United Kingdom, I was working for a financial company, which was a subsidiary of a major bank in the UK, and I was working in the UK HR department. It had been personnel, but they changed the name to human resources, and a lot of people didn't want it to be called human resources because they felt that it was Americanized, and they didn't want to be Americanized. But nevertheless, they changed the name to human resources. So that was like my first experience and seriously working for a company in the UK. And basically it's turning dark again. I don't know what its problem is. And so that was my first experience of working for a company in the UK. They weren't nice. I was in a really bad marriage. I was married to my second husband, and at some point I'm going to make a video about that too, because he was a nasty man, and I ended up leaving his house with almost nothing, just a few of my things and almost nothing. And I didn't get anything out of that marriage, even though I gave up my career for him. But that's another story, another video. So I was working in human resources, and the people in human resources weren't very nice, and it was my first job in the UK. I had been in the military before, and I just wasn't accustomed to English people. I wasn't accustomed to the way that English people thought and the way that English people worked. And so basically, what I learned is the hard way is you just go into work, you don't say very much, and you do your work. I'm sure that there are people who make friends with their coworkers, but I have never been one of those people, not really. Even when I did make a friend with a coworker, after a while those friendships just fizzled out. I remember one thing that one of the human resource managers said in a meeting was that she said that it was an unwritten rule that they had to fire 10 people a year. And so basically that's what they did. And they would target people to fire. And so they would collect evidence of those people, because they would have to get enough evidence together to actually fire them. And so really, when you're at work, it's best just to stick to your work and not much else. But I don't even talk to the people that much, just have shallow conversations. But I was in this terrible marriage, which I'll probably make videos about that at some point. And I married him because I wanted to come to England and I wanted to have a family. But he turned out to be such a totally unsuitable person. And then I found out some things that he was doing that were not lawful. And obviously that made my situation even worse, because I was having to go into this office and work with people who were not supporting me. I would have to go home to this monster, and I wasn't in a good situation at all. So I actually left that company. But they would target people to fire, because they felt that they needed to fire 10 people a year. And so the people that they would pick on would be the vulnerable people. And then they would start keeping documents, start keeping a record of those people's activities. So it's best just to go into work, do your job, just be shallow. Because any of the places that I've worked, none of my friendships ever lasted. So it's best just to go into work and be shallow. And so we're going to fast forward 20 years to when I was working at Foster Wheeler. And I don't know, one thing that you need to know is that human resources is not your friend. And that's one thing you need to know. People think that if they've got a problem, they can go speak to human resources, and they shouldn't, because human resources is not your friend. Been watching these videos from this lady in America, and she's called Employment Law Attorney. And she talks about employment issues from an American perspective. But a lot of these employment issues from an American perspective can cross over to the UK. But that's the thing is, human resources is not your friend. That you shouldn't go in and speak to human resources. Human resources is not there for the employee. Human resources is there for the company. They're there to make sure that the company is legally doing what it's supposed to be doing, and to cover it up if they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, to cover it up. So I had a few occasions with human resources when I was at Foster Wheeler, because that's what people think. People think if you've got a problem, go speak to human resources, but you shouldn't. And so in one of my videos, I was talking about blacklisting and retaliation. I'd lost a lot of weight, and there was this client who was following me around, and I was scared. So I went to Human Resources because I was scared. And obviously, Human Resources wasn't interested. They didn't want to know. And so I just ended up getting a black mark in my book, and I was blacklisted. And if you're interested in knowing what happened in that regard, I would recommend you watch my video about blacklisting and retaliation, because that's what Foster Wheeler did to me. Then I had another incident when I was working on my NVQ, my diploma in accountancy. It would be an NVQ level 4, and it would have made me a part qualified accountant. And so I went to Human Resources and asked for some assistance in that. And of course, they didn't give me any assistance. So I ended up doing a simulation and submitting my simulation to the AAT for my coursework to get my diploma in accounting, and it would have been an NVQ level 4 in accounting. But I never got any. I got a master's degree while I was working at Foster Wheeler through distant learning. I did my diploma in accounting at Foster Wheeler. I never got any extra money for that. I never got any praise because they weren't interested in me. They didn't care what I did, you know. And it was mainly because of what that client did that I was scared. And I got blacklisted from the company because of that. They didn't care that I got my master's degree in the company, and they didn't care that I have an NVQ4 in accounting. And I was the affiliate coordinator. I was more than qualified to be a cost engineer, but they would not allow me to be a cost engineer because they had blacklisted me, and they decided that I was just going to stay in that job forever until they wanted to get rid of me, which is what they did. And then so another time, I just think that all of my experiences with Human Resources were negative experiences until when it came time for me to get run out of the company, when they had no further use of me. And I do believe that them running me out of the company was financially motivated. They did a lot of really awful things to me, or they had their employees do a lot of really awful things to me. And because they had their employees do a lot of really awful things to me, they're saying, oh, well, it's nothing to do with me. I didn't do anything. Yes, they did do things, because Foster Wheeler is vicariously liable for all of the things that its employees did while they were in the Foster Wheeler premises. And so I asked for help. They called me one time when I was being harassed. I went into Human Resources and I showed them some emails that I received, and they said, oh, well, we can protect you at work, but not anymore. So there was nothing to do with that. Human Resources wasn't going to do anything about the harassment that I was subjected to. And then I told you in a previous video about how the director called me into an office with another member of Human Resources, and he told me that I was having a breakdown. And that didn't go very well either. I didn't handle that well, because at this point I didn't know that Foster Wheeler was behind all this. You know, but now if I had known what I know now, and if I had known that I wasn't going to be listened to, if I had known all this stuff, I would be like, oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. I guess I'll have to go see my doctor then, you know, or something like that. But because I didn't know that Foster Wheeler was behind it until towards the end. it didn't go well when he said I was having a breakdown, because I wasn't having a breakdown. I was trying to survive being gang stalked, and I didn't know who was gang stalking me, but I found out when I made my grievance that it was Foster Wheeler was behind the gang stalking. And then so I made my grievance, and then so everybody, they spread it around all over the company that I was mentally ill. And then they told everybody in the company to say hello to me. So people that I never knew, people who wouldn't give me the time of day, would always look up at me and say, hello, hello, hello. And that was just part of their plan to destabilize me. And then, so when I filed my grievance and they did an investigation, but of course there wasn't any investigation. There was no investigation. They pretended to have an investigation, but it wasn't. They said that there was no evidence of any harassment. They said they were not going to phone the police. And that was telling me that I wasted people's time and for me to go see my doctor, because that's what they were doing. They were spreading it around that I was mentally ill because they're trying to cover up what they were doing. And I saw this letter, and it was 2 paragraphs. It was a 2-paragraph letter, and I saw that it was very harshly written. And I remember being on the bus. I was on bus number 9, and I remember I started crying because my grievance wasn't resolved. It wasn't acted on. And I didn't know. I was starting to get an inkling that Foster Wheeler was behind it when all the people at Foster Wheeler started confronting me, people who never would have spoken to me before, and said hello. And by that time, I realized that I was beginning to realize that Foster Wheeler had something to do with it. And then I filed an appeal. And that didn't go very well. My appeal didn't go very well. And I didn't even read the result of the appeal because it was just, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And then I tried to make a complaint to the Information Commissioner about what Foster Wheeler was doing, because Foster Wheeler was obviously using my personal information to harass me. I didn't get anywhere with that. I didn't get anywhere with any of the complaints that I made. And then so finally, they got rid of me. So I was called into a meeting with the director, and that didn't go very well. I was crying, and that didn't go very well. And the director said, I'll think about it. Of course, he wasn't going to think about it. Of course, they knew they were going to get rid of me. And so a week later, they escorted me out of the building. And I received all these letters and things. And so the first letter was really nastily written. The second letter I didn't even bother to read. And then when they fired me, I didn't want to read that letter because I was all on my own and I didn't have anybody to help me. And they told me that I could appeal that being fired. But I was so emotionally drained, not having any support, that I decided not to appeal it. But this woman in Human Resources, I still, even after all this happened, I still believed that she would help me, which she didn't. And then, but basically when they fired me, they wrote me this nasty letter telling me that I better not say anything about them. Of course, they didn't want me to say anything about them because they were being sold to AMAC. And so, because they were being sold to AMAC, they didn't want any negative publicity. And then so they let me go, and they called a taxi to get rid of me, so I couldn't even wait at the bus stop. And then so I'm over here distraught, having lost my job, and this taxi driver asking me for my phone number. You know, that he's asking, I'm over there in shock over what had been done to me. And the taxi driver was asking me for my number, so I wouldn't give him my number. And it took a while. It took a while for me to actually read that letter that the director had written and read the letter from Human Resources. Human Resources sort of issued me a threat telling me that I had better not say anything about Foster Wheeler. And the director, what they had done is I had given them a list of instances that had happened since I've been in the company. And what they had done, this is what, because it was about 60 pages of stuff. What they had done is because it was all electronic, they had pared it down to about 20 pages, something like that. So they had taken most of the instances that had happened out and then just left it with like 20 pages. But I think it was close to 60 pages. I had about 60 pages worth of instances. And so all of this has been, all of the instances that I cited, it's been removed. And then this director was saying that since I couldn't get along with people, that they didn't have any positions available for me because I couldn't get along with people. And it was nasty. The letter that this director wrote was nasty. The letter that the Human Resources wrote was nasty. And it took me a while to be able to even read the letters because I knew they were going to be nasty. I knew that based upon the first letter that I received from Human Resources, I knew they were going to be nasty. So I just wasn't up to reading this vitriol. But I did actually read the letters, and those letters were so awful that they could have been used as evidence of an abusive, toxic relationship with my employer. That's just how nasty those letters were, that I could have used those letters as evidence to prove just how toxic and abusive my employer was to me. And then I think what happened was somebody rang me up and they wanted me to go register at an agency in another town. And in order for me to register at this agency at another town, it meant I had to get up early and I had to take a train to that other town and register with the other town. And I also had to go, there were 2 towns that local to the town I live in. And I think that day, because it was an all-day trip, just to get up, take the train to the other town, register with the other town, take the train back, and get home. I think that was long enough. That was a long enough time for them to go into my apartment, take all of these letters that had been dubiously written, and replace them with more moderately worded documents. So now I don't have any of the letters that they wrote that were nasty, that brought me to tears. I think that they wrote these really awful letters to me because they wanted me to find myself in such a distressed state that I would harm myself, because they wanted to get rid of me, but they wanted to make a little bit of money out of it too. And so I was the only person in the company that did the affiliate coordinator role, so they could have taken a key man insurance policy out on me. And I do believe that they have taken financial policies out on me to make money on me, and I was even looking on the internet about ways that companies make money on their employees. And one of the ways that companies make money on their employees is to take insurance policies out on them without their knowledge. And I think that's what was done, because Foster Wheeler definitely had my signature. And I just believe, yeah, human resources is not your friend. Just don't even go see human resources. Human resources isn't there for you. Human resources is there for the company. And in my case, human resources was used as a criminal cover-up, used as a vehicle to cover up Foster Wheeler's, the criminal way that Foster Wheeler treated its employees. And so in hindsight, what I would recommend is you live your life cleanly. Don't get involved in any dubious activities. And if you really seriously want to make a grievance or have a complaint, then you go see an employment lawyer and get advice from the employment lawyer. Those were the mistakes that I made. Those were the mistakes I made. So just so you can benefit from my misfortune, if you have a complaint about your employer, if you have a grievance, make sure that you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, and you're not doing anything that you're not supposed to be doing. And you go see an employment lawyer, and you get advice from an employment lawyer about the best way to handle the situation. And I didn't do that. And Foster Wheeler was going to get rid of me anyway because they were being sold to AMEC. But if I had sought the services of an employment lawyer, and if I had not believed that human resources was going to help me, which they weren't, then maybe I would have left a little bit easier. Maybe, they would have made me redundant. I don't think they were ever going to find me other work to do because they wanted rid of me. But I'm just telling you what I learned from my experience, and that don't trust human resources. Don't go to human resources. If you can ring ACAS, they're not going to be much help either, but you can ring ACAS and talk to them. And if you really feel that you want to make a grievance, then go ahead and speak to an employment lawyer and get some advice from an employment lawyer before you just make a grievance on your own. So I'm just giving you the benefit of my bad experience so you will know that human resources is not your friend. Human resources is not going to go to bed with you. Human resources is always going to do what the company wants them to do. And I found that out the hard way. And even now, I've heard things that I can't repeat. So human resources may say that they have to support you, but in the end of the line, they're going to do what the company wants them to do. And that's what I found to be the case. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for taking an interest in my life, as pathetic as it may be. Bye.